All right, EntreArchitect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for the EntreArchitect Context and Clarity live conversation for Thursday, December 15th, 2022. Thanks for joining me today. As you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here and let us know where here is for you. Where are you joining this conversation from? If we've never met before, my name is Jeff. I'm in Indianapolis, and I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. It doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Maybe you're looking ahead, 2 weeks, and you say December 31st is coming soon, so 2023 is my year and I'm going to launch my own thing. Or maybe you have owned your own firm for a year or 10 years or 28 years, and you're starting to rethink or reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need-to-know topics for the success of entrepreneur architects just like you. So thanks for joining us today. There's a different face on the screen with me today. Mandy Freeland, hello.
Hey, hi from California. And hi everyone in the chat, especially Scott, since you shouted out to me specifically. Hi, Scott.
It's great to have California represented in this conversation today. Mandy is my guest co-host today. She's been here before, so she's familiar. You are familiar with her. You know that we're in good hands. Catherine is off. She is playing in the band tonight. She's the rock and roll fiddle star. Not really rock and roll. She wouldn't like it for me to say that. But Catherine's playing in a fiddle concert tonight, and Mandy is stepping in, and she's going to keep me in line today. So thank you for that, Mandy.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. I'm always happy to step in.
Yeah,
and excited. I'm always excited to hear Catherine doing her fantastic fiddling in a concert. That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I've been talking to her for quite a while now about a new Context and Clarity theme song, and she's resisting that. But one of these days, she says she's okay with rock and roll fiddle. One of these days, I'm going to twist Catherine's arm and have her play us a Context and Clarity theme song on the fiddle. So still working on that. Looking around the room, I see Mark R. LePage. Looks like he was the first in today. He's joining us via Facebook today. So welcome, Mark. First in the room. I think this is your first ever John Kinney Memorial Crocheted Bathtub Award. That's the award that we give out for the person that makes it into the room first. So Mark, welcome. Glad you're joining us. Leah, welcome. Glad you're here from Facebook as well. Catherine is here. Chris Novelli from Massachusetts. Scott Thrift, as Mandy said, he's joining us from San Francisco. He says it's sunny here in the Midwest. We have already started our 9 months of gray, so we don't even know what sun means anymore, but welcome back, Scott. Jessica from LA, anxious to hear about the future. Think about the future. Welcome, Jessica. Glad you're here. And it appears that Mandy has a whole section here, a cheering section, which is awesome. It's great to have all of those. Janine, welcome. She's testing Restream. That's a good reminder. Thank you for that, Janine. She's joining us from Arizona. If you are on Facebook right now and you're commenting away, you're typing away, and you go, hey, why are my comments not showing up on the screen like Luciana's or Chad's or Catherine's? It's because you're in a private Facebook group, and there happen to be rules associated with that say that Facebook can't let your name and your likeness and your comment out unless you give it permission. So there is a URL in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now. It's chat.restream.io/FB, like Facebook. You open a different browser window so you don't lose this, but open a browser window, type that into the bar up there. A couple of clicks later, you'll give Facebook permission to let your comments out, and you should start showing up on the screen right after that. So that, we always say that URL, chat.restream.io/FB, that's the place to solve all of your problems. So give that a shot, chat.restream.io/FB. And for those of you that are joining us, lots and lots of people coming in here. I see Ray Brown from Australia. Great to have you with us, Ray. Ray was a guest here on Context and Clarity Live. I've completely lost track. I'm going to say 2 months ago. I may be wrong about that, but I always love talking with Ray. Thanks for joining us this morning from Australia, Ray. Great to have you. Yeah, it looks like we've got maybe a little bit of a bandwidth issue or something with blurry screens, but we'll try to figure the tech out as we go. I don't think it's going to affect our conversation here at all. And we've got someone in the green room. We've had them back there for a while. We stocked the green room. It's different every week, right? With every guest, but we stocked the green room this week with water and English toffee. And I don't know what you do with that. I don't know if you mix those up. I don't know what you do. I don't know how that works. We're probably going to have to get to the bottom of that as we bring our guest out. But, honestly, it's the end of the year. We're running out of budget for these types of things. There's not that much English toffee back there. It may be gone by now, so we better bring our guest out here. Let me do this. Let me introduce them. Our guest today is a leader. It could be full stop at that point. Our guest today is a leader. Her activism extends from the missing 32%, now equity by design, to chairing the Equity in Architecture Commission, to the boards of the Boston Society of Architects and the American Institute of Architects. And now she's the 99th, but only the 6th female president of the American Institute of Architects. We need to talk about that. Emily Grandstaff-Rice, welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, Mandy. Humbled by your words, and I'm happy to be here. And yes, RPI in the house.
Yeah, you're going to have there. I don't know what it is about this community, but there are a couple of schools on the East Coast, RPI being one of them, that there seem to be an inordinate number of alum in the house. So great to celebrate it with your alum. It's great to have you.
Awesome.
You started before we went live. You started to tell me about English toffee, and making some distinctions here. And just to set this up, we talk about coffee sometimes, and I have some very strict rules about coffee. I am 100% coffee snob. There are some things that just shouldn't even exist. So you can go wherever you want with the English toffee story, but I want to hear more.
Well, I'm probably the opposite of a coffee snob. I drink decaf, which nobody quite understands, but due to some health issues in my family, we thought it was a lot easier if we just, in solidarity, stuck to decaf. It's too difficult to mix. So there was a time when I went to Paris for Thanksgiving with my family 3 years ago, and I'd gotten a tip to go to this small cafe near Le Marais, and I remember going to the boulangerie, and it was like 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, so it was like really early French time. And I asked if they had decaf coffee, and I'll never forget the answer. The gentleman says to me in English, he goes, "This is France. Here, coffee is coffee. We don't do decaffeinated." And I was like, okay.
That
Can I have my croissant?
Did you have water?
Well, okay. So that was a little bit of a setup. I mean, you asked me what I wanted in the green room, and I said water, but that was purely practical. I think that's a element of my personality. I think about the practicality, and then I think about like the fancy thing that I get to ask for. But English toffee. So the story is, my husband and I bought a cottage in southern Maine earlier this year, and in Gunkwit, and it has some legacy feelings for me, because it's a place of the country that I used to go to, or I introduced my parents to, I want to say within the last 10 years. And since they passed away, it was sort of a nice thing to do, to, even though they're no longer with us, to carry on to that tradition. So long story short, on the way up to the cottage, I stop in Kittery, and I've gotten into English toffee, but I have to have it from this like one place in Kittery. So I guess that's my snob moment. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. You've got to have standards. That's what it's all about. Yeah. Very good. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us. And congratulations on your inauguration about almost a week ago now, I think.
1
Yeah,
week, day
1
7.
week. There you
Yeah.
go. I remember a couple of lifetimes ago, I think for both of us, when I was working with somebody that was running for national offices. You had started thinking about things and doing things, and already in leadership positions, obviously. And you mentioned at that point, and I don't even know, I'm not even going to try to calculate how many years ago that was, but you had mentioned a run for national president even way back then. And so to me, this means a lot to have you in that position and to have this conversation right now. So very heartfelt congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What does it mean? And I can't even imagine what you were thinking back then in terms of the significance of holding that position. Like I said in the intro, 99th president. As we know, Kimberly Dowdell will be 100th president. So we're right on that almost to the 100 mark, but only the 6th woman to hold the position, to hold the office. What does that mean to you? And what do you think that means for the future of the profession?
Well, I talked about it in my inauguration speech. I'm actually okay with the number 99. It's funny because when people realize that, I get one of two reactions. Either people are like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You're 99th. And then there's a whole bunch of other people who are like, oh, man, you just missed it. You could have been 100. And for me, 99 is actually a significant number. I graduated with my first degree from RPI in 99. Like, I'm okay with that cusp because it means, in a way, I talked about this last Thursday. I've always considered myself a bit of a cultural bridge in this profession. When I started as a senior in high school and I got a job in an architecture firm, a small firm, I might add, the first thing that I had to do was learn how to hand letter. Literally, they sat me down with Ching Architectural Graphics, and I had to learn how to hand letter because that was the way me as an 18-year-old, I could be the most productive, which is lettering the drawings. And in retrospect, architectural lettering was really about assimilating. So how could we be like each other to the point where you couldn't determine one person's handwriting from another? I will say another significant part of my job was frankly running blueprints from here to there and everywhere, right? So it was a different practice. We had personal computers, but the principals, I was working in an office that had 3 people at the time. The computer was off in a corner. There was one computer for everybody. And basically I did CAD standards because we were building things up. And just to date myself one more time, the program that we were using was HOK Draw. So they hadn't even upgraded to AutoCAD 13 at the time. We were using the proprietary software that HOK had developed. So I come with that I don't know, legacy baggage, whatever you want to call it. And then I look at practice today and it's radically different, right? And that's over what has been the lifespan of half of my professional career, right? So I kind of joke like I'm having my like little crisis right now because I still have another 20 plus years in this profession. So being 99 in some ways signifies, with the legacy and the history of the Institute, there are some things that I can honor and close out because at the end of the day, I see an incredibly bright future ahead of us. I'm Gen X. We were talking about this before we went live. I'm Gen X. So we calculated that Dan Hart, the 98th president, was also Gen X. So the two of us are there. But the next president, Kimberly Dowdell, will be the first Black female millennial president. I mean, I'm the youngest female president right now, but that's only going to happen for a hot 365 days, right? And so it's okay to mark that moment, but also to feel like there's better things to come. And by better, I mean improving upon.
Right.
So what does it mean to me? It means that for anyone who thought that you needed to hit a certain benchmark or level in the profession before you could become a leader in the AIA, I'm proof that you don't have to do that. Like you can do it on your own timeline, and your voice is important. For me, who never always felt 100% comfortable, especially in the earlier years of my career, in what was, my school was 5 males to every 1 female, or in the construction industry, it was not always a place where I saw people like me. You can do this, and it's there. I think my presidency is really about the promise of the future is now, and the future is also going to be brighter past me. It's a year. It's a year, and I get to make as much good, positive change as I can. But I also recognize that I need to set it up so that this movement, what we're part of, can be sustainable and live past my tenure, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it really does. And it's as you were telling the story about lettering, I just about asked you if the name of that firm was Richardson, Munson and Weir, because I did my internship at Richardson, Munson Weir a few years before your story. The 2 architecture partners, Richardson and Munson, had gone to IIT in Chicago and had Mies van der Rohe as a professor. So they were well seasoned by the time I joined the firm. And that's exactly, I started out every day hand lettering and working on my hand, my line work, my line weights by hand. And we had a computer in the corner, the whole story. And so the way that you told that story really does put it in perspective, the amount of change that's happened since 99, or, for me, that was 92. What is that? 30-ish years or something like that. Looking ahead 30 years, I can only imagine,
Yeah.
What's it going to be like?
We don't know what's coming, but we
Right.
know that we need to be flexible, and we know that we need to be able to integrate it. And I think there's certain key tenets that we learn in design education, and we learn in the practice of design that we've got to equip us for the future. But I think it's when I'm going to dive into a little story here, which is Frances Hesselbein, who was the first CEO of the Girl Scouts, actually passed away yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And a colleague had sent me a note because I remember meeting her at an AIA event like a decade ago. And one of the things that was interesting, and I talked about this a little bit, I spoke to Western Massachusetts AIA last night, and I talked about how, when she inherited the Girl Scouts in 1976, it was declining membership. People thought it was really kind of a vestige of old practices. Society was changing. Like, let's say the Girl Scouts was more about domestic arts and that. She had to reinvent what it was. And I think the way that she approached it is, when you've got something that's in flux, you find the thing that doesn't need to change, which is about girl empowerment or sense of community, but everything else is on the table. And I think in many ways, architecture is like that. The power of design and what we can do and the impact that we can have on people's lives, that will never change. But the tactics, the ways in which we practice with each other, we collaborate, the tectonics of literally building something, that does change. And as long as we can stay core to why it is what we do and how we can have positive impact, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's interesting, because as you were telling the Girl Scout story, and that that was the question I was going to have is that the point that we're at? Maybe not quite that drastic, but is that the point that we're at in terms of architecture or the Institute in having to rethink maybe the role that the Institute plays? I think we have to give some serious thought to the role of the architect in terms of what is the true value of an architect and the actual impact. It's always going to come down to lives, impacting lives, but what about the services? What about the problems that we solve? I think those are things that we've really got to seriously think about. This is a great question, Mandy.
Well, and it's funny, the AI board had a conversation. See, look at me trying to like go back to my notes from last week. So this is a vestige of old culture, right? I always carry this notebook around with me, and the days where I forget it at home, I am just a hot mess. But I think one of the things that the AI board talked about last week was beyond buildings, and this was led by educator Tom Fisher from the University of Minnesota, which is, so long we've held on very tightly about the title of an architect, its importance with health, safety, welfare. And I'm not saying that's not important. It is critically important, but we also do other things. And we see this with the co-opting of architect, both positive and negative on various news stories or in the realm of software. I mean, we build things, we create things. I think ultimately we have the vision to create that idea that our client had, and they don't even know how to make it happen. We're like the ultimate translators or co-creators. And I think that translates, frankly, into ways in which we can rethink systems, and that we can rethink processes, policy, all of that. We were trained to solve really big problems in ways that synthesize and create. And that does not mean we need to be constricted to the physical realm. So I think, I love this question. What is an architect really? An architect is somebody who evaluates, and this is not going to be perfect, so I should just answer this every week and see how I develop. An architect is someone who looks at context, who looks at all of the factors around them, who's able to anticipate future needs and really pull it together in a way that exceeds a client's expectations.
So this question came up from this morning's Clubhouse conversation. And I'm not sure if Jeff told you, in the mornings, we do a Clubhouse conversation at 6 a.m. my time, but really 9 a.m. your time. And this question came up, was an architect really? And there has been a lot of discussion about how AI could be taking the place of the architects. As far as, if you've got the codes, AI can probably interpret the codes to make something code compliant, but like, what's the value of having it be a person instead of a program?
Well, so this is where I default always to my computer science fascination in high school and college. And my apologies, there is a party going on in my office. So if you heard massive boos, it's not because of my answer. I don't know what's going on out there.
We need verification of that, I think.
Mandy, I think you can build an AI program, but ultimately there's always a designer of that. You need someone to put the inputs in. And just because you build this machine, and I'll call it machine for lack of inspiration, right? You still need someone to run the machine and to know when to do it at a certain time. And I think AI is going to be massively powerful because it's going to allow us to do the things that, frankly, we might not always want to do. I think we don't recognize there's a lot of grunt work in traditional architecture. There was one project, a very large 60+ story hospitality project that I worked on, where I did door schedules for 6 months. Like, is that the best use of my time and my intellectual capacity? Right? That's something that I would love to automate. But you still need somebody to be able to say, at this type of door, you need to have this type of hardware. At this type of intersection, you need to have this type of door. So I think AI is incredibly powerful, but there's always going to be a need for the human element of it to evaluate not just how the programming or the development of the AI goes, but also its impact. And one of the books that's on my reading list is Machine Learning by Phil Bernstein, who is the I think he's the associate dean at Yale, and he's been talking about this for years. So, good question. And yes, the 99 restaurants are a thing in New England. I'm not a born and bred New Englander, so I forget about that. But I've been joking. It's like price tags and pop songs. But yes, I'll add the 99 restaurant.
The restaurant.
And if my kids were here, they'd sing the jingle.
I think, when it comes to the AIs and the generative design, I mean, we've got to remember those are tools. I did a live inside the EntreArchitect network this morning, and long story short, I was talking about my day yesterday, and I said, we're finishing up this kitchen renovation here at home. We're down to punch list at this point. And I could go to Lowe's and buy a new hammer, right? I don't know why I would, but I could go to Lowe's and buy a new hammer and bring it home, and I could complain that hammer is not doing a great job, right? But it's just a hammer, right? And what's my goal with that hammer? Is it to drive a nail with one strike? If so, that brings in a lot of questions, right? Am I actually capable, strength-wise, of doing that? Do I have the right technique? Did I buy the right hammer, a 12 ounce versus a 16 ounce versus a 5 pound or something like that? It's just a tool. Where I use it, how I use it, learning to use the tool, which is architects. And this is not just architects, but anybody that uses software, I would argue, maybe beyond, or not as far as computer scientists or whatever, but, raise your hand out there if you don't use your BIM software to its full potential, right? Every single person better be raising their hand right now, because you're using whatever software it is, you're using it to about 10% of its capability, right? And I think we really need to latch onto the tools, AI or BIM or whatever it is, your hammer from Lowe's, and learn to use it better before we start getting scared about what it is and isn't going to do in the profession.
Yeah, and I will sort of add one asterisk to your question about the raising of the hand, which is sometimes I don't use it to the full potential because I know there's a different tool out there that can do it better. Yeah. And I think that the
that's a good point.
Intersection of different tools doing different things is important. I never want to have one tool that will do it all, because then, frankly, I think that limits us. I talk about this sometimes when I'm working with emerging professionals and we're looking at different sort of Adobe Creative Suite. Like, there's something that you can do in Photoshop that, frankly, you could do it in a different way in Illustrator, but it has the same output. But it's important to know the capacity, Jeff, to your point, it's important to know the capacity of the tool that you have, but also to know that you can do it in adjacent ways, in adjacent ways that might save you time too. So you don't always have to do it with one tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're in this profession now, and as we said, things are changing. We talked with Jamie Claire Kaiser last week about mergers and acquisitions. And one thing that I see, I think this is kind of reinforced by what she's seeing running the mergers and acquisitions at Zweig Group, is that a lot of firms are getting bigger. Big firms are getting bigger, which means probably that a lot of the medium-sized firms are going through the M&A process. And we see here in our community, in the EntreArchitect community, we see new firms being born all the time. And this is a community of small firm architects. We prefer to say entrepreneurial firms, but small firm architects.
Yeah.
So I think one question is, and I know that AIA has CRAN, Custom Residential Architects Network, which is a lot of those are small firms. We've got the Small Firm Exchange, and it's interesting to go to the Small Firm Exchange page and see the statistics that are cited there. 75% of firms within the AIA are small firms, which is quantified as 1 to 10 employees. So it seems that the percentage, and we're talking about firms, not people, right? It's maybe hard to keep that straight, but we're talking about firms. If the percentage of small firms is getting larger, what does that mean for, I would say, one, for the profession, but what does it mean for the Institute?
Well, I think for the Institute, there's always been a different percentage, right? And I would say, yes, it is growing. And when I look up, I'm double checking my statistics, so bear with me. So the most recent data, which is from last year, there are more than 19,000 architecture firms nationally, but an overwhelming majority are very small businesses. You're absolutely right. And over 5,000 of these firms are small practitioners. So that's a huge chunk. That's 25% essentially when I do my quick math are sole practitioners. And I think that speaks to the fact that architecture itself is an entrepreneurial practice, that you can do it on your own, and there isn't, let's say, a mandate that you must be with a large firm, as long as you follow the applicable laws that you need to be licensed in the jurisdiction in which you're practicing. So I think that in itself is some flexibility. And I know that there is a question out there about unionization, but I'll give you my own personal opinion later on, which there have been some countries in which you have not been able to practice unless you're in a union, and that whole other conversation. So, going from there, nearly 6,500 firms have 2 to 4 employees, and about 2,800 have 5 to 9 employees. So 75% of architecture firms, Jeff, you're right, have fewer than 10 employees. And I think that is a very important and unique data points. On the other extreme, less than 7% of architecture firms have 50 or more employees. And so we are inherently, numbers wise, when you count it just in terms of instances of firms, we are a small firm practice. That being said, despite the small share, these firms account for a large share of design activity across the profession, and architecture firms with 50 or more employees account for well over half the employment in private practice nationally.
Yep.
So the number, you can play the numbers both ways in terms of importance. To speak to the question of what is the value for AIA for small firm owners and solo practitioners, I would say, when you are in a small firm, having the power of a community, EntreArchitect is a community, AIA is a community, and I don't want to say there's sort of like, one or the other. We blend, and in the Venn diagram of life, create many connections. It's within this communities that we find camaraderie, that we share resources, and that we learn research and knowledge that we wouldn't be able to do on our own. So in many ways, I think the value of the AIA is the ability for small firm owners to go beyond the bounds of their own office, to be a much larger player in the industry. And if nothing else, it's fantastic to be able to call up a colleague and say, hey, I've got this issue. Can we talk about it? That's how I've seen it. I've been really fortunate in my career to work in small offices, small as like 2 of us at a time, and medium-sized firms. And now I'm at a very large firm, and that's only 3 weeks into it. So don't ask me big questions about big firms just yet. I'm still learning. It's literally the lingo. I'm learning the lingo. And I think that has given me a perspective that there's advantages to each of those situations, and we have to be a profession to be flexible enough to realize that at different times of your life or different moments in your career, isn't it great that we have choice?
Yeah.
Right.
a few weeks ago, we talked with Melissa Wackerly, who's at AIA National. As you know, she's a resiliency and sustainability strategist there. And one of the is a fantastic conversation. And Melissa is obviously top in the game in terms of strategy in those areas. But one thing that was just, at least my perception was, it was just glaring, was as Melissa rattled off, hey, here's this resource and that resource. And, she has them right off the top of her head because that's her area. And the rest of us, it sort of felt like the rest of us are looking around going, oh, I didn't realize that was there. I didn't realize that was there. We don't think about going to AIA.org and hitting the resource tab to see what's there. So there's lots and lots of resources that we are probably not aware of. One of some of the things that we hear all the time, and you mentioned, EntreArchitect and AIA, that's almost a total overlap. It's not complete, but there's an awfully large percentage of EntreArchitect community that are members, and so on and so forth. So it is a melding. And one of the things that we hear a lot, right, the reality of starting, running, managing a small firm are things like, how do I compete? How do I find insurance? How do I, is there an option besides this subscription option at this major software retailer, et cetera? Is it appropriate to say that it would be great if AIA had a really good option for firms to find, and this is, apologies to those of you who are not in the United States, because this is a 100% US centric question. Our healthcare system is broken here. Is it reasonable to say, wouldn't it be great if AIA could help small firms with this? Those types of, where the small firms don't have the critical mass that a large firm has, to go and negotiate pricing, to go and go into a healthcare marketplace, or whatever the topic is. Should AIA be playing a role in those types of issues for small firms?
Well, I would say I asked you at the beginning of this before we went on air, who's your wish list of who you'd like to have? I'm going to put one on your wish list, which is, I think you should really speak to Elizabeth Wolverton, who's the executive director of AIA Trust, or Amy Slattery. Because the AIA Trust does touch upon those things. Now, I'm sure as some of this is coming out of my mouth, someone's going to talk about a positive or negative experience that they've had with AIA Trust. But that is set up to be able to address some of those concerns specifically, and they're interested in feedback of how they can do better and how they can be a better resource, especially in starting your own firm. I mean, Amy has a fantastic story of how she started her firm, Odemo. And I think she would be a great person to address that. So I'm trying not to pass the buck, but some of those resources do exist, and it's better for you to really hear it passionately from Amy.
But I think it's important that. Yeah. I think it's important that you point that out, though, because, just like we learned with Melissa, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was out there. Didn't know that was out there. And Leia is here in the comments, who's a shining example of starting her firm, expanding her firm, growing her firm through a merger and acquisition process. And she says AIA Trust has great resources that no one knows about. So, I think that's another lesson for all of us, is that there's probably a lot more out there. There's a whole bunch of hammers at Lowe's. There's a whole lot out there at AIA that we may not be aware of. When we think about, the focus of I don't know what number we're quoting anymore, but at one point, 90,000 members, something in that.
96,000. We just hit a new high.
Wow, that's amazing.
Last week. So 96,000.
Wow.
it's a little above 96, so I won't quote the specific number, but
yeah. It when we think about, I guess going back to the idea of the bridge, you said, and we think about these transitions from the two of us hand lettering to AI. What one of the things you mentioned was collaboration. I think that's a big part of the future of small firms, would be my guess.
It's
Is
huge.
Yeah,
And when you think about, frankly, the diversity that the profession needs, most of that is found in small firms and small firm leadership. And so it's really exciting for me to see, especially in the public realm, which is where a lot of my work has been over the past couple of years, opportunities for small firm owners to partner with larger firms or to get a better share of some really impactful public work. It's exciting to see. And I have a good friend who, she became a WBE. It was her opportunity. Like, being a WBE doesn't get you the work, but it gets your foot in the door. And sometimes that is a critical first step to growing a firm. And now she's making the leap past 10 employees, and it's becoming much bigger. Sorry to cut you off, Jeff. I just wanted to
That's
share my excitement on that one.
yeah. Well, it's an exciting time. I know the earnings index was down for the first time in a long time, but I still, as we look around, um, as we look around the community, one of the biggest issues, struggles that we hear right now, and we have for a couple of years at this point, is how do I find help, right? How do I get the work done? Good problem, but it's a legitimate struggle.
And that happens at any scale.
Yeah.
I was there's a board member who bent my ear about the fact that he's a small firm. He trains his employees really, really well, and then they jump ship for larger firms. And it was a moment of regret for him, because he invests so much in those who work with him, and yet, he feels like he doesn't have what it takes to retain them. But I will say that large firms also struggle with talent, and I think that's going to be one of the critical issues over the next 5 years. Yes, billings are down. I think perhaps I'm the daughter of an economist, so I see things perhaps in more of a long-term way. We were really working through a backlog with the pandemic, right? And this is slowing down and becoming a little more normal. And anytime you raise the interest rates, you do see some work slow down just because of the cost for financing. I do explain this to my 12-year-old this morning. It was really hilarious. She's like, "What's interest?" So anyway, I think we have some opportunities to reevaluate and work through some of the backlog that we've had. And I think the projections that I've heard, and these are just projections, so don't, you get what you pay for them, is that I think there will be some growth in 2023, but it won't be what we saw in 2021 and 2022, and that's okay.
So I have a question for you. Sorry, Jeff.
Go ahead.
I know you've done a lot of work in EDI, like a lot, and we've seen the number of women in the profession grow during the time that you've been working really hard, and that's fantastic. And I wanted to thank you for that. One of the things that I serve at AIA California as the leader for the emerging professionals. And one thing that we talk about a lot is bridging the gap between the generations, and not just, integrating. I mean, the whole diversity thing is also generational, thoughts and values, needs and wants and expectations and stuff. How do you see bridging the gap in the profession? Like, do you see it as something we need to really address and focus on, or do you think it's something that maybe organically it'll just come together naturally, or what do you think?
I think I'm going to break it down to like its most basic, which is we're all people. We're all people. And at the core of it, if you're in this profession, you want to succeed and you want to have opportunity. And for many years, whether it be based on your gender, your racial, or your ethnic background, sometimes it's socioeconomic, sometimes it's your sexual orientation or identification, sometimes it's based on a disability. For whatever that difference is, people have not been able to engage in the profession to the best of their ability. And that's either through opportunity or, I'll just say it right out loud, bias, right? We know that there is bias, and it's not unique to the profession. Unfortunately, it's baked into our society. It's baked into who we are. And I'll speak for the American context, right? So, wow, Emily just laid a really heavy thing on there. Okay, so now we build back, which is at the end of the day, we're people, and people want to be able to succeed. And I think the ways in which, I guess I wouldn't categorize diversity as a generational thing, but I would say that attitudes towards opportunity is sometimes, characterizing anything is a little dicey, right? Because you can be over identifying or under identifying different trends. But I would say that what's been really exciting is a conversation about how many different voices actually yield to greater creativity, greater empathy, more awareness. I'll give you an example. So I'll never forget this. I was giving an update about the Equity and Architecture Commission in Vermont. Love Vermont. And I was talking about, so if you're designing spaces that are intended for women only, it makes sense to have women on your team. And there was one male in the audience who got really worked up, and he's like, "Are you telling me I can't design a women's bathroom?" I said, "Absolutely not. You can design a women's bathroom, but have you asked someone of that gender what's important to put in there?" And I think that for me was an example of sometimes there's a lot of, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, at the AI, we like to talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, because really it's about equity and the sense of belonging rather than, let's say, diversity. Some people have said like diversity is all of the different, to use your candy metaphor, Jeff, Skittles, right? Or the dance one where, equity is being invited to the dance. Diversity is I don't know, I'm getting it all wrong. But anyway, what we're hoping for is a sense of belonging, so that like not only can you be part of something, but you can contribute to it. So that being said, I think one of the challenges for small firms is that there's been a lot of awareness at the large firms, whether it be training, implicit bias, intercultural competency, and that isn't mandated or regulated in small firms, right? And I'm not saying that, without education, people can't be aware, but you just don't have necessarily the processes or the procedures to ensure that you are talking about things in an equitable way. And we're seeing that a little bit in the 2022 firm survey report. When asked, very specifically, do you have equitable or talent recruitment processes, we're seeing large firms more in the 80% reporting rate, where small firms are on the 29. And I think this is a way in which the AI can also provide resources. We have a whole report that was commissioned and launched last year about bias in the profession of architecture. The report is called "The Elephant in the Well-Designed Room," and it was commissioned through the University of California, Hastings. And it talks about things that, frankly, we all know about. It's that whether it's prove it again bias for women. Sometimes women have to do things multiple times to get the same recognition as men. And I'm not saying all firms are like that, but there are some places in which they have to do that. Or affinity bias. I mean, we're all sort of rah-rah RPI, but if you're in an office that only hires RPI graduates and you don't look at other graduates, then you might have some affinity bias there. And I think the way I like to explain is we're all in a spectrum. And we're all in a spectrum in different realms. I'll be just very, very transparent with my own development. I think, I have grown through this work since 2015 in my understanding of what it means to be an anti-racist, what it means to be culturally aware. I was probably pretty high on my gender spectrum, but I have grown in my cultural awareness of different racial and ethnic concerns out there. I'm still growing in some of my other, spectrums. And I think as long as we see ourselves with the capacity to build, as opposed to taking a stance of defensiveness or fear of like, if we go forward in this, there isn't a role. There's absolutely a role for everybody in architecture. That's the bottom line. We just want to make sure that there's opportunity, that we aren't holding people back. That speaks directly to what Jeff was talking about, which is talent retention. We know we need talent out there. So why are we sometimes turning talent away because of reasons of their own cultural, ethnic, or racial identifiers?
Intentionally or not.
Yeah, intentionally or not.
Yeah. What you mentioned, you cited the 80-some% versus the 20-some% large firm to small firm. Why do you think there's such a wide gap there, a big difference between those two numbers?
I would say, I think it's just, the question itself was, do you have equitable hiring or talent recruitment procedures? I think in small firms, and this is just based on my own personal anecdote of being in small firms, that there's less protocol. And sometimes that's the attraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not going to a corporate place, that people know who I am and I can be my whole self, right? The downside of that is that sometimes the procedures or the ways in which we do things, because we're not HR experts and we don't have an HR expert sitting next to us in a small firm, that, we're doing things the way we think we're doing it best. And that might not be the best practice.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
It does. And I think it's important that we understand and embrace that dynamic, because the reality of small firms, there are certainly, you were talking earlier about the breakdown, the percentages. I think the percentage is something like 25% sole practitioners. So there are people that are certainly committed to being sole practitioners, and there's nothing right or wrong about that, right? That's just,
they don't have to have equitable practices because, or they don't have to have hiring procedures because they're on their own, and that's okay.
Yeah. And beyond that, if you go from 1 to 2, right, that's significant growth all of a sudden. But that is the dynamic of small firms, is intense transition, growth. When we look at the, whatever you want to call it, statistical or whatever, the decision to hire your first person, your second person, to grow from a 3-person to a 10-person office, that is huge change. That's not even a blip on the radar of a, you mentioned the HOK software. That's not even a blip on the radar for HOK, right? Not to throw anybody under the bus, but for a large
I've never
firm,
worked for HOK, so hopefully I don't offend them.
No, I mean, that's not about them. It's just an example of a large firm. That's one of the things that we really have to understand, is that, in my opinion, right, if I'm consulting with a firm of 2 people that says, hey, I don't have a policy for that, my answer to that is, that's okay. I don't care if you don't have a policy today, but the day that you realize that you need one, that's when we need to develop that policy. That's the reality of small firms. And I think
this is where we come
really
full
need to embrace
circle, which is the guides for equitable practice and the elephant in the well-designed room literally have guides for procedures of how to be equitable in hiring and retention and evaluation and sponsorship, all of that. I personally put a lot of work into that. There's some amazing researchers out of the University of Minnesota, University of Washington. Shout out to Renee Chang. I mean, we dove into this head first because we knew it was important.
So I want to put those up on the screen. The elephant in the, I love that one. That's very well. The messaging is excellent there.
I will say there was one board member last year where, and this is hard work even for AIA board members. So when we had a conversation about this report, I actually personally called every board member to get their feeling on it, because even when we talk about it at a leadership level, the AI, we have to be sensitive that everybody's coming to the table with their own lived experience and their own understanding of it. And it was amazing to have the spectrum of some people saying like, this affirms my own experience, and some people saying like, this isn't really for me. Like I'm in the Midwest, I'm in flyover country. This is really a coastal thing. And to be able to pull together like, why is it important and how do we talk about it in different ways? I will say one board member did say to me, she's like, she goes, why are we talking about the elephant? The room is on fire. She's like, climate action. The world is falling apart. I get the bias thing, but we've got other stuff. So there's that opinion too. What I love about this profession is that we are so creative. We don't agree. It's okay that we don't agree, but man, we do some amazing stuff. And I think it's in that dialogue and that way in which we come together, to go back to collaboration, that we feed off of each other and we get amazing ideas. I love being an architect. I love that I get to have this ongoing conversation with members over the next year and hopefully beyond. Maybe you'll invite me back, because obviously I've got more than all I can say in an hour.
Yeah. Well, it's this is another one of those conversations that I would love to keep it going for another hour, but there's a Christmas party going on right behind your screen there, so I don't want to keep you from that. So maybe the question to ask to wrap up episode 1 of this conversation is, for small firm architects out there that feel like there ought to be more resources. They don't know, right? We've well established the fact that there are resources out there that we don't know about. But for small firm architects that are out there that say, hey, what's AIA doing for small firms? What can AIA do for me? What should they do? What should the first step be to engaging with AIA and finding out what support there is, resources or whatever form that takes for their firm?
I would say, this is going to sound trite, but like, go to the website and start to play around with it. I think, especially in the realm of equity and sustainability, there's incredible resources out there, but we also have economic forecasts. I'm going to be able to do them over the next year, so you'll see my smiling face in the economic forecast. I think it's, start to follow the conversation. Maybe that's the best entry point is like, start to follow AIA on LinkedIn or social media, and that's going to give you a good round out of all the things that we have out there. I wish I could tell you the best place to go, but I'm also cognizant that different people come with different needs, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to search it out when you have a specific need or you need to fill that gap. And my goal is that resource is there. If it's not there, then tell us, whether it be through the small firm exchange or send an email to the board of directors, and we'll go from there. But I think, as I just overpromised, I will say, one of the things that we do talk about is that we can't be everything to everybody. Yep. So where the AIA can't be an expert in helping you solve cyber attacks. Why? Because we're not IT experts. I mean, does it happen to us? Absolutely, right?
Those are other architects.
Those other insidious architects out there. What we can do is speak to issues of the built environment. Yep. And so, where it's issues of insurance and healthcare, that's handled by the AIA Trust. And sometimes that nuance gets lost because we represent so many members. We're really trying to be focused and speak to issues in the built environment and advocate on your behalf on issues of the built environment, and not get too lost in every little thing.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And, we'll have, that's the perspective, obviously, for everybody in our community. That's the perspective from the AIA national point of view. And Mandy, reach out to Mandy, because she's going to tell you, as I would as well, hey, you've got local chapters, you've got local components,
Yes.
whatever you call it, chapter sections, whatever, in your state. Those are places to plug in. That may feel a little bit more personal to you because it is local. So there's
Absolutely.
information and resources out there. Yeah.
And
We have
if I
over
can
200 chapters.
Right. If I can add, if there's something that you have to complain about, not you, Emily or Jeff, but the audience, feel free to volunteer in your local AIA chapter. And if you feel like there's a needed change, your voice is needed to make that change.
See, I thought suddenly you were opening up the Festivus celebration, because it starts with the airing of grievances. That's good enough for an aluminum pole right there. All right. Emily, again, congratulations. It's great to see you in this role after however long ago those conversations we had were. Congrats on that. Looking forward to your year of presidency, and also looking out beyond that to Kimberly and beyond. So thank you for joining us again. I'm going to call it episode 1, because we need to do this again. And
We should do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for, I think, a really intriguing conversation. And enjoy the Christmas party.
Thank you so much. Actually, to be honest, I have to go to my son's orchestra concert at 6:30. So let's be honest, it might be just like one quick visit and then I'm out of here. So anyway, thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you so much for joining us, Emily.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And to all of you out there, again, I say this every week, but I do mean it. Thank you for making context and clarity a thing, because without context and clarity, we wouldn't be having this conversation with Emily. So this opens the door to having these conversations about the future of our profession. So thank you all for making this a thing. I still say that I log on every afternoon wondering if this is the afternoon where I'm the only one that's going to show up. And it hasn't happened yet after 656 or so conversations. So thanks for keeping it going. We'll be back at it again tomorrow morning on Clubhouse at 9 a.m. Eastern, and then same bat time, same bat channel, 4 p.m. Eastern, inside the EntreArchitect Community Facebook group. Our question for tomorrow, as we wrap up this week talking about the future of the profession, is: where should small firms lead the way? We'll start that at 9 a.m. and then continue it at 4 p.m. We'll wrap up our week that way. We will not have Context and Clarity Live next week, because next week is the EntreArchitect and Context and Clarity holiday party, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern. So this is our final Context and Clarity Live of the year. Feels weird to say that. But we'll give you more information about that tomorrow. Again, thanks to Emily. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Mandy, for guest co-hosting today. My wish for all of you is that you be well and stay safe. Keep everybody around you safe and well. Find a little bit of time to breathe, relax, find some way to rejuvenate. We do this every day. You have to pace yourself. It's been a long journey. Thanks for going along with us. And we'll see you for the next episode tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
This is my last photo, this is me dancing with my daughter at my inauguration. She was in an inflatable dinosaur costume. And somebody said on Facebook, I know some of our members are old, but really? So I'll leave you with that.
That's perfect. Thank you, Emily.
That's great.
Thanks, everybody.
I love it.
We'll see you tomorrow.